I'm Madison Williams, 16 years old, and the night my life changed forever started just like any other. It was late October, and the cold seeped through the cracks in my bedroom window. I had just finished a drawing for school when my dad stormed in, his face red with anger, my mother and younger sister Lily right behind him. Lily, in full tears, accused me of stealing money from Dad's wallet. I was stunned, couldn't even form a word in my defense. They ransacked my room, flipping through my things, pulling the sheets from my bed, searching for something they could use against me. When my dad found a crumpled stack of cash under my pillow, everything fell apart. It was my sister's doing, but in that moment, no one believed me. They threw me out of the house barefoot with nothing but a trash bag filled with a few of my clothes. The door slammed behind me, and I stood there frozen, not understanding how my life had just unraveled. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been misunderstood by the people who were supposed to love you the most. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, raised by my parents, who always taught me the value of hard work and integrity. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. My dad worked in construction, always working overtime to provide for us, and my mom, though she often stayed busy, made sure to teach me the importance of kindness. They had their rules, their expectations, and they didn't like it when anyone questioned their authority. It's the way I was raised. Respect was important, but so was understanding your place in the family. I never questioned it. I was the older sister, the one who was supposed to set an example for Lily. At least that's what I thought. But in reality, I was always in her shadow. Everything I did, from making honor roll to winning first place in a local art competition, seemed to be brushed off. On the other hand, Lily could do no wrong. When she got a role in her school play, it was the talk of the house. When I brought home awards for art and good grades, I was lucky, according to my mom. That's how it always was. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough to earn the same recognition that Lily got. I used to tell myself it didn't bother me. After all, I had friends at school who appreciated my quiet nature. I was good with a pencil, always drawing my thoughts away. But at home, it was different. Every small mistake I made was magnified, while Lily's missteps were met with excuses. One time I accidentally left the garage door open for an hour, and I had to hear about it for a week. But when Lily dropped a whole set of plates and shattered them, my parents just laughed it off, saying she was still learning. I couldn't stand it. That disparity made me feel invisible, like no matter how hard I tried, I could never outshine the younger sister everyone adored. But the truth was, I was always trying to do what was right. I believed in hard work and honesty. I thought my parents shared those values. But everything came crashing down the night of the accusation. My sister Lily had always been spoiled, but this time her manipulation went too far. I had been in my room sketching a new design for an upcoming school competition when she came in pretending to cry. I didn't know what she was up to at first, but then in an instant my dad and mom were storming into my room accusing me of stealing. I couldn't believe it. They didn't even give me a chance to explain. Before I knew it, Dad was pulling blankets off the bed, throwing them aside as though I were some kind of criminal. And then just like that, he found the money that had been hidden under my pillow, left by Lily herself. In that moment, I knew this was it. There was no way out. They didn't care what I had to say. I could see the disbelief in my mother's eyes, the way she clung to Lily for support. And I realized something that night that changed me forever. My parents never truly saw me. Not for who I was, and certainly not for who I had worked so hard to become. As the cold night air hit my bare feet when they threw me out, it felt like the world had just cracked open beneath me. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had cast me aside, believing my younger sister's lies. The very people I had been working so hard to prove myself to were now the ones who turned their backs on me. And there I stood, the darkness swallowing me whole. I didn't know where to go. The world outside seemed bigger than I could ever imagine, and I didn't have a clue where to start. But in the weeks that followed, I began to see something I never expected: the truth. Grandma Maggie, who everyone thought was too old to notice anything, would become the person who would unknowingly change everything. She overheard something she wasn't meant to hear, and from that moment, everything started to unravel. But that's a story for next time. I couldn't believe what was happening. There I was, standing in the cold, holding a trash bag with my life inside it. My parents had just thrown me out of the house in the middle of a freezing October night, believing I was a thief. My younger sister Lily had framed me, and now I was nothing more than a liar and a criminal in their eyes. My heart sank as I looked back at the house, the home I had grown up in, where I had worked so hard to earn my parents' approval, only to have it torn away in a matter of minutes. I couldn't understand how everything had turned so wrong so fast. My father's angry words echoed in my ears, the door slammed behind me, and I knew I had no choice but to walk away. As I walked through the dark streets, my feet frozen and sore, the weight of what had happened pressed down on me. I was alone, and it felt like the entire world was against me. All I wanted was for someone to believe me, to understand that I hadn't stolen anything. But with my family, it wasn't about understanding. It was about blind trust in the wrong person. Lily, with her perfect smile and sweet demeanor, was always their favorite, and now she had gotten what she wanted me out of the picture. The streets were quieter than I expected. No cars passed by, and the cold air stung my face. I didn't know where to go or what to do. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't go back to the house. I couldn't face my parents again, not like this. I kept walking, hoping for something, anything that would change this night, even though I knew deep down nothing could. I found myself at a park near my school. It wasn't the safest place, but it offered some shelter. I sat on a bench, wrapped the thin jacket I had in the trash bag around myself, and tried to sleep, but the cold seeped into my bones and sleep didn't come easily. I kept replaying everything over and over, my father finding the money under my pillow, Lily's fake tears, my mother's silence. How had I become the villain in my own story? I kept telling myself that it would get better, that I would find a way to fix things. But every time I thought about my parents, my chest tightened. They had chosen Lily, believed her lies over my truth. They had thrown me out without even giving me the chance to defend myself. I knew they had their reasons, but they didn't even listen to mine. It wasn't just that they didn't trust me, it was that they never even cared to ask what happened. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just a mistake they wanted to erase. The next few days blurred together. I moved from one friend's house to the next, never staying long enough to get comfortable. Samantha, my childhood neighbor, took me in for a few nights. Her mom didn't know what was going on, but Samantha kept me hidden, giving me a place to rest. But I knew it couldn't last forever. After a few days, Samantha's mom caught a glimpse of me and grew suspicious. It didn't take long for her to pull me aside and ask me what was going on. When I told her, her expression shifted from concern to something else, something I couldn't quite place. She didn't want to be involved, so she told me it was time to go. With nowhere else to turn, I started couch surfing, staying with anyone who would let me, but it never lasted. I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the worry that if they kept me around too long, their families might get involved. I didn't have anyone to turn to, and the rumors about me at school were growing louder every day. I had become the talk of the halls, the girl who had stolen from her father. At first, I didn't even notice it, but it didn't take long for the whispers to reach me. I could hear them whenever I walked down the hallway, and it stung more than I cared to admit. No one had bothered to ask me what happened. No one cared to listen. They just assumed I was guilty because Lily had said I was. My teachers stopped looking at me the same way. My gym teacher, who had always been so encouraging, began to treat me like a failure. When I asked if I could sit out of a run because I was exhausted, he didn't offer a kind word. He just looked at me like I was lazy, like I didn't belong. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, but it did. Every day, it got harder to ignore the way people treated me. One day, after a particularly brutal encounter in the cafeteria, I realized I couldn't stay at school anymore. I had lost everything. My family, my reputation, my place at school, it was all slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. I wasn't just rejected by my family anymore. I was rejected by the world around me. But as everything around me continued to crumble, something unexpected happened. My grandmother, Grandma Maggie, the one person in the family who had always seen through the surface, heard something that would change everything. While I was out on the street struggling to survive, Grandma had overheard a conversation, one that would make her realize the truth. Grandma Maggie had always been quiet, always observing, and no one expected her to be the one to uncover what had really happened. But when she did, She knew exactly what needed to be done, and it would be her quiet strength that would eventually pull me from the depths of this nightmare. But that's where the story truly begins, and that's where I'll take you next time. I never expected my grandmother, Grandma Maggie, to be the one to change everything. After I had been cast aside by my parents, wandering from house to house, I had pretty much given up on the idea that anyone would care enough to listen. But then one evening, while I was still trying to survive in the park, Grandma overheard a conversation that made her realize the truth. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. In a way, I never thought Grandma Maggie would even be aware of the chaos in our family. She had always been quiet, kept to herself, and let my parents handle everything. But there she was, sitting at the dinner table in her quiet home, listening to my sister Haley boast about the terrible things she had done. I can't imagine the shock Grandma felt when she heard it herself, Haley laughing on FaceTime, telling a cousin about how she had framed me, placing the stolen money under my pillow, and crying her way into my parents' favor. Grandma didn't shout or make a scene. Instead, she quietly set down her iPad and opened the voice recorder app. She captured every word, every confession that Haley made, all the lies, all the smugness. At that moment, Grandma made a decision. She knew what she had to do. When Grandma came to me, the weight of her silence was heavy. I hadn't seen her for days, not since the night everything changed. I didn't know what to expect when she knocked on the door of the library where I had been hiding away in the corner pretending to read. But when I saw her standing there in her old coat, her face calm but resolute, I knew she was about to do something that would finally put an end to the madness. Madison. "I know what happened," she said, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving mine. For the first time since all of this started, I felt like someone truly understood. I didn't need to explain. She already knew the truth, and that truth in Grandma's hands was about to tear through the lies that had been built around me. We didn't say much more that night, but I could feel the shift in the air. Grandma had a plan, and she was going to make sure the world knew I was innocent. The next morning, Grandma took action. She asked my mother, Melissa, to meet her in the church after the morning service. It was a small request, nothing too grand, but I could feel the pressure of what was about to happen. When I thought back to all the things my mother had said, how she had turned a blind eye to the cruelty in our family, how she had silently agreed with my father when they decided to cast me out, it felt impossible that anything could ever change. But Grandma wasn't asking for permission. She wasn't waiting for approval. She was doing what had to be done. The church smelled like oak and candle wax, the kind of old wood that carried the weight of history in its scent. The air felt heavy as my mother entered, her face still painted with the facade of someone who had it all together. Grandma didn't waste any time. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She opened the recording, and there in that quiet space my mother was forced to hear the truth. Haley, in her own words, had admitted to framing me. There was no escaping it now. For a moment, my mother didn't move. She just stared at the iPad as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But it wasn't just the words that shook her. It was the fact that Grandma had seen through everything. She had known all along, and she was finally showing my mother the truth that had been hidden behind her denial. I wasn't there to see my mother's reaction, but I could imagine it. She would have been shocked, perhaps even horrified by the things Haley had said. But it was too late for apologies to be swept under the rug. This was bigger than family pride. This was about my name and the lies that had been woven into it. Grandma didn't stop there. She knew that the truth had to be known by more than just a few people. It had to be public. So after the meeting, Grandma insisted that my parents make things right. A public apology had to be made. There could be no more lies. They would have to admit what they had done, not just to me, but to everyone. They would have to take responsibility for throwing me out, for believing the lies without question, for causing me to lose everything. It wasn't going to be easy. My parents had a reputation to maintain in the community. They had always been the picture-perfect family. At least that's what they showed the world. But Grandma wasn't afraid of what people might think. She wasn't interested in protecting their image. She was interested in justice. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The texts, the calls, the emails, it was all happening too fast for me to keep up with. But through it all, one thing was clear: the truth was coming out. My parents could no longer hide behind their excuses. They had to face the consequences of their actions, and so did Haley. I don't know how my mother felt as she sat down to write her apology, but I knew that once the words were out there would be no taking them back. The damage had been done. The community would know the truth. And as for me, well, I was about to take back everything I had lost. But there was one thing left to do. Haley. She would have to face the consequences of her actions too. No more hiding behind her tears, no more pretending to be the innocent one. It was time for her to apologize, to look me in the eye and admit what she had done. Only then could things start to heal. And as Grandma sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, I knew that this wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about taking control of my life again, about reclaiming my voice and my power. I had been silent for far too long, but no longer. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. What happened next? Well, that's where things really began to shift. But before we get there, let me tell you how everything changed after my father's world came crashing down. It wasn't long before everything I had feared started to unfold. I had no idea what to expect after Grandma Maggie's quiet revelation, but what happened next made it clear that things were about to shift in ways I hadn't imagined. My parents were forced to confront their actions, but it wasn't the private conversation I'd imagined. It was bigger than that, public, messy, and full of consequences. When Grandma insisted that my father face the reality of what he had done, I knew the stakes had risen. There was no backing out now. They had to come clean, not just to me, but to the community, to everyone they had deceived. And my father, he never liked to be cornered, especially when it came to his reputation. He always prided himself on being the man with authority, the one who set the tone in our home and in our small town. But now the truth was out, and there was no way for him to hide behind his pride or his lies. That afternoon, I sat in my room while the storm brewed downstairs. I could hear my father's voice, low and tense, but there was a new edge to it, something unrecognizable. The sound of Grandma Maggie's calm voice cut through the noise. It was steady, unyielding as she made her demands. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was insisting on justice. I couldn't hear everything, but I could make out the tension in my father's responses. I imagined him pacing, fist clenched, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but deep down I knew that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my parents being forced to reckon with their own mistakes, with the choices they had made that led to me being cast out. The hours that followed felt like days. Grandma's actions were swift and decisive. She wasn't waiting for anyone to give her permission. She knew the truth, and she was going to make sure it came to light. By evening, both of my parents had made their public posts, one on Facebook, the other in a church group message, retracting their accusations and clearing my name. When I saw the post from my mother, my heart twisted. It was a mix of relief and something I couldn't quite place, anger maybe or sadness. She had written a public apology, admitting that she had been wrong to believe the lies that she had allowed Haley's manipulation to tear our family apart. I hadn't expected her to do it not like this. And yet the words on the screen didn't feel like they belonged to the mother I had grown up with. They weren't words of comfort or love. They were just a resignation, a way to repair the damage done to their reputation. But the apology wasn't enough. The more I read the words, the more I realized that it wasn't enough for me to just be cleared of the accusation. I had lost something more than just trust, more than just my place in the family. I had lost the feeling that I mattered, that my voice counted for anything. I wanted more than just an apology. I needed accountability, not just from my parents, but from Haley. After everything I'd been through, the last thing I wanted was for her to get away with what she'd done. I didn't know if I was ready for this fight, but I knew I had to take a stand. The next morning, my father came to me. He stood at the door, arms crossed, his face tight with frustration. His eyes didn't meet mine as he spoke. "You embarrassed me enough, Madison," he said. His words stung more than I expected. The thought of him still believing that I was the one who had done something wrong hit harder than anything else. "Come home. But first you'll admit you stole the money. You'll apologize to me, to your mother, to Lily. Only then will there be peace. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I wasn't going to apologize for something I didn't do. My throat felt tight, and the words felt foreign in my mouth. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing me say it. "Don't make me call the police," he said, after a beat, his voice low, like he thought that would somehow make me cave. "I'll tell them you ran away with the money. I've got people who will back me up. You want to end up in jail." My heart dropped. The threat of the police, the idea of being dragged into that world of lies, it felt like it would crush me. I thought about my time on the streets, about the people who had looked the other way, the friends who had shut their doors on me. I thought about how it had all led to this moment. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You can call the police if you want. I'm not going to confess to something I didn't do." I saw his face flush. His hands clenched into fists. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I turned and walked away. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with him, not with the lies. That night I went back to the only place I felt safe, Grandma's house. She didn't say much when I arrived. She didn't need to. She just held me while I cried. The next morning, after a long night of not knowing what would happen next, Grandma made it clear. She wasn't done. She had a plan for everything, and her resolve was unwavering. We were going to make Haley take responsibility, not just with words, but with actions. She was going to apologize, not in private, not in a whispered conversation between us, but in front of everyone. She needed to understand the weight of what she had done. She had to face the consequences of her actions, just like my parents had to. And so, we set the stage for the next confrontation. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to back down now, not when the truth was on my side. Not when the whole world was watching. The storm was about to get much bigger, but I was ready for it. What came next would change everything. The days that followed the apology felt strange. At first, I couldn't quite believe my parents had actually gone through with it. My father, the one who had always been the one to make the final call, had been forced to do something he never would have imagined: apologize publicly. The weight of it hung in the air, and even though it was a step toward the truth, it didn't feel like enough. Not yet. I needed to hear Haley's apology, and I needed to see her face the consequences of what she had done. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about making sure she knew that the world wouldn't let her get away with it. She needed to understand that lies, especially the ones she'd told, had a way of catching up with you. And she couldn't hide behind her sweet smile or fake tears anymore. I knew it was coming. Grandma Maggie had already made it clear that Haley would have to take responsibility for everything. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread in my stomach. Would she apologize? Would she even admit what she had done? Or would she try to twist the story again, just like she had when she first set everything in motion? One afternoon, Grandma called me downstairs. My parents, Lily and Haley, were there waiting in the living room. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the tension in the air. It was the moment I had been waiting for, but I didn't know how it would unfold. My father was sitting with his arms crossed, his face hard as stone. My mother was there too, her eyes downcast, her hands twisted in her lap. And then there was Haley sitting quietly, her usual air of confidence gone. For the first time, I could see a trace of fear in her eyes. Grandma looked at all of us for a long moment. She didn't say anything at first, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. She was taking it all in, making sure every word she spoke would carry the right weight. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Madison has been through enough. It's time for you, Haley, to face the truth." Haley shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what you want me to say." She muttered, her voice quiet but defiant. She wasn't going to make this easy. Grandma's eyes softened slightly, but her tone didn't change. "You'll say what's right, Haley. You'll say you lied. You'll say you put your sister through hell because of your jealousy and that you're sorry for everything you've done." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched Haley. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Was I hoping for a heartfelt apology, or was I preparing myself for more lies? She wasn't the same person I had once known. Not anymore. Haley looked at the floor, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. For a long time it seemed like she was going to stay quiet, just like she had before. But then her voice broke the silence. "I'm sorry." She said the words barely above a whisper. I didn't believe her at first. It sounded too rehearsed, too forced. She hadn't even looked at me when she said it. I wasn't sure if it was because she wasn't ready to face the reality of what she had done, or if she thought an apology would just make everything go away. But it wasn't enough for me. I needed more than a simple sorry thrown out, like it meant nothing. I needed her to understand the weight of her actions, to feel the hurt she had caused. I stood up, my feet steady beneath me, and walked toward her. I was done being quiet, done being the victim in her game. "Sorry isn't enough, Haley," I said, my voice clear and firm. "You don't get to pretend that everything's fine now that everything's just going to go back to normal. You ruined my life. You lied. You made everyone believe I was someone I'm not. And you did it because you couldn't stand that I was better than you." I could see her face flush with anger, her eyes flashing with the old resentment she'd always had for me. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't the same girl who had been thrown out on the streets with nothing but a trash bag. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let it be silenced by her anymore. "You've hurt me, Haley," I continued, my words steady. "But you don't get to walk away from this. Not until you make it right. You owe me more than just words. You owe me your apology, your honesty, and your understanding of what you've done." For a moment, there was silence. Haley didn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the floor. But then slowly she lifted her head and looked me in the eyes. It wasn't a look of defiance this time. It was something else, something close to regret, or maybe even fear. "I'm sorry," she said again, this time louder, her voice breaking. "I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't mean for it to hurt you." I could feel my anger start to fade, replaced with something else. Maybe it was relief, or maybe it was the recognition that for the first time in a long time, Haley was actually owning up to her actions. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. But as I looked around the room, I knew there was more to be done. The apology wasn't enough to erase the damage. My parents needed to face the reality of what they had done too. They had failed me when I needed them most. They had chosen to believe the lies over the truth, and that wasn't something I could just forgive in a moment. Grandma's voice cut through the silence again, her words clear and final. "This isn't over yet. There's still more to be done." And she was right. The battle wasn't finished. Not yet. It felt like a weight had lifted when I heard my parents make their public apologies. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was being seen not as a liar or a criminal, but as someone who had been wronged. My parents' apology came in a Facebook post of all things acknowledging that they had made a mistake in believing Lily's lies and clearing my name. But there was still more to be done. I wasn't ready to just move on. The damage done was deep, and a simple apology wouldn't erase what had happened. What had hurt the most, I realized, wasn't just being accused of stealing or being thrown out of my own home. It was the fact that no one had believed me. My parents had chosen to trust Lily over me time and time again. That kind of betrayal left scars deeper than I cared to admit. Even with the apology, I didn't feel like I could forgive them right away. It wasn't just a matter of words. It was about trust. And trust was something that couldn't be rebuilt overnight. The tension in the house was thick after the apology. There was still this heavy silence between us, especially between me and my parents. They had done what they could to clear my name, but something had shifted. The quiet looks, the awkward silences, they all spoke volumes. And then there was Haley. I couldn't just let her slip away from this. She had to face what she had done to me, to our family. A few days later, Grandma Maggie set up a family meeting. She made it clear that this wasn't just for apologies, but for accountability. She wasn't going to let my parents off the hook, not entirely, and she wasn't going to let Haley walk away without fully owning up to the mess she had created. The meeting was set for that weekend. My parents, Lily, and I were all supposed to be there. I spent the night before the meeting pacing my mind, spinning with everything that had happened and everything that was about to unfold. I had so many questions for my parents, things I wasn't sure I was ready to ask. Could I trust them again? Would they finally see me for who I was? Not just as the good daughter who always did everything right, but as someone who had been hurt by their blind favoritism. And what about Haley? Was she really going to apologize, or would she twist the truth again just like she had before Grandma Maggie was the only person I had left who truly understood what had happened? She had been the one to stand up for me, the one who saw through all the lies. She was the one who had made sure the truth was finally heard, and now she was the one holding us all accountable. When the meeting began, it was quiet. There were no loud arguments, no outbursts, but you could feel the tension in the air. My parents sat on one side of the room, Haley beside them, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Grandma Maggie was on the other side, her face calm, but her presence filled the room with a kind of quiet authority. I sat across from them, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't this. I thought we'd fight, argue, but instead there was just this strange stillness. Grandma Maggie spoke first, her voice firm. "Madison," she said, turning to me, "I know you've been through hell, but today we're going to fix this. We're going to make sure that everyone in this family understands the consequences of their actions." I nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. My parents needed to understand that I wasn't just the good daughter anymore. I wasn't going to sit quietly and let their mistakes slide. Grandma looked at my parents, then at Haley. "It's time for you to take responsibility, Haley. You've hurt your sister, your family. You've lied and manipulated your way into getting what you wanted, and now you're going to own up to it." Haley shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to my parents for support. But they didn't offer any. This time they were silent. They were waiting for Haley to do what needed to be done. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Haley finally spoke. "I'm sorry," she muttered, her voice low and hesitant. "I didn't mean for everything to get out of hand. I was just angry. I didn't know what else to do." I looked at her, trying to read her expression. It wasn't enough. Her words didn't match the reality of what she had done. This wasn't just about saying sorry. It was about understanding the damage she had caused, about owning her actions fully. But it was clear to me now that Haley wasn't ready to do that. She wasn't ready to face the truth. I stood up slowly, my hands clenched at my sides. "Sorry isn't enough, Haley," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of everything I was feeling. "You've ruined my life. You've made everyone believe that I'm a thief, a liar, and for what? Because you wanted to be the center of attention." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You don't get to lie your way out of this. You don't get to pretend it's all over now. You owe me more than just words. You owe me the truth." My parents were silent, their eyes downcast. They knew what Haley had done, but they didn't know how to fix it. They didn't know how to undo the damage they had caused. Grandma Maggie, who had been watching quietly, finally spoke. "Enough. Haley, this is not about you feeling sorry for yourself. This is about accountability. And it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." The room fell silent again. This time it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was tense, charged with the weight of the truth that had finally come out. Haley looked at me, her face pale. "I'm sorry," she repeated, this time with more sincerity in her voice. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted, I wanted to be noticed, to be loved." I could see the cracks in her armor now, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the pain she had caused, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was all I needed to move forward. The meeting didn't end with everything fixed, with everything solved, but it ended with the truth finally on the table. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a chance at getting my life back. I wasn't going to let Haley off the hook, and I wasn't going to let my parents forget what they had done, but I had my voice back. And that made all the difference. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I knew I wasn't alone. The aftermath of the family meeting left a strange stillness between us. The apologies had been made. The truth had been spoken, but there was something else lingering in the air, something I couldn't quite put into words. Even though Haley had finally admitted to what she had done, it didn't feel like it was over. There were still things left unsaid, things I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. I had my voice back, but the road to healing was far from clear. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The apology, while important, didn't fix everything. It didn't make up for the months of heartache, the sleepless nights, or the loneliness that had defined my days on the streets. It didn't erase the whispers at school or the way my classmates looked at me like I was a stranger. But it was a start, and it was enough to give me a small sliver of hope. Things didn't change overnight. The tension in the house was still there, hanging between my parents and me like a thick fog. I could tell they were trying, but it felt like they were doing it out of obligation, not out of a true understanding of what they had put me through. My father, who had always been the one to hold the power in our family, still looked at me with a mixture of guilt and frustration. He was trying to make things right, but I could see the struggle in his eyes. I didn't know what I expected from him. Maybe I thought he would be different. Maybe I thought the apology would come from a place of real remorse. But it didn't. It was as if he was still holding on to some version of the truth that only he believed in. He didn't know how to face what he had done, and that was harder for me than anything else. I didn't need him to be perfect. I just needed him to be real. Mom was different. She seemed to want to move forward, but there was a distance in her eyes. She had always been the one to smooth things over, the one who made everything feel okay. But now I could see the cracks in the facade. She had tried to protect Haley, and in doing so, she had lost me. I wasn't sure if we could ever get back to the way things had been. Maybe we never would. But Grandma Maggie, she was different. She didn't mince words. She didn't try to make everything perfect. She didn't expect anything from me except the truth. And for that, I was grateful. She had been the only one who truly understood, the only one who had fought for me when everyone else had turned their back. I stayed with her for the next few days, letting the noise from the world outside fade into the background. I spent my time painting, working on the designs I had put on hold for so long. It felt good to focus on something I loved, something that reminded me of who I was before everything fell apart. Grandma didn't ask me questions. She just let me be sitting with me in silence, offering a cup of tea or a quiet word when I needed it. It was during those quiet moments that I began to think about what I wanted for the future. I had no idea where to go next, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in the past. The truth had been revealed, and now it was up to me to find my way forward. One evening after dinner, Grandma and I sat on the porch. The sun had just set, casting a golden glow across the yard. She turned to me, her face calm, yet there was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "I know you're hurting, Madison," she said, her voice steady. "And I know it's hard to forgive, but you have to let go of the anger. It won't serve you." I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it, but I knew she was right. I couldn't keep holding on to the pain. I couldn't keep letting it define me. It had already taken too much from me. "I'm trying," I finally said, my voice soft. "But it's not easy. I don't know if I can forgive them, Grandma. I don't know if I can trust them again." Grandma nodded, her eyes reflecting the years of wisdom she had gathered. "You don't have to forgive them right away. You don't even have to forgive them at all if you're not ready. But you have to forgive yourself, Madison. You've carried enough for everyone else. Now it's time to carry yourself." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time trying to make everyone else happy, trying to make everything okay for them, that I had forgotten about myself. I had let their mistakes define me, and in doing so, I had lost sight of who I really was. I've been so angry I whispered, my eyes focused on the ground. Angry at them, angry at myself. I don't know how to let go of it. "You don't have to let go of everything all at once," Grandma said, her voice kind. "But you can start with small steps, one day at a time. And you'll find that the anger will fade, even if it's just a little bit. And with it, you'll find peace." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I couldn't fix everything right away, but I could start to heal. And that was enough. The next morning, as I stood in front of the mirror getting ready for school, I felt different. Not perfect, not healed, but different. I was ready to take back my life, to rebuild the pieces that had been shattered. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would still be moments of doubt. But I was no longer the person I had been before. I had a voice, and I was going to use it. When I walked into school that day, the whispers were still there, but they didn't sting as much. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't afraid of Haley or my parents or anyone who had tried to silence me. I was going to keep moving forward no matter how hard it got. And as I looked around the familiar hallways, I realized something else: I wasn't alone anymore. Grandma had shown me that. And as long as I had her and the truth, I could face whatever came next. But even with everything beginning to fall into place, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. There was still one more thing I had to do, one more piece of this puzzle I had to put together. As the weeks passed, everything felt like it was settling into place. The tension at home had started to ease, though it didn't disappear entirely. There was still a distance between me and my parents, especially my father. But there was also something new in the air, something that hadn't been there before: respect. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. We were all trying, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were moving forward instead of just circling in the same old patterns. I had returned to school, and while the whispers hadn't entirely stopped, they had softened. The stares weren't as sharp, and the cruel comments were fewer. I was no longer the thief they had all thought I was, and somehow that weight felt a little less heavy. But it wasn't just about the reputation anymore. It was about finding my place again, finding a way to step back into my life after everything that had happened. There were days when it felt impossible. There were moments when I questioned if I could truly forgive my parents or if I'd ever trust them again. I wasn't sure if that was something I would ever get back, at least not in the way it was before. But I wasn't focused on that anymore. What mattered was that I was taking control of my own life. I was no longer defined by the lies or the hurt. I was deciding who I wanted to be moving forward, and that was enough for me. Grandma Maggie continued to be my steady support. She didn't offer quick fixes or empty promises. Instead, she gave me space to find my own strength, to make my own decisions. Every day I spent with her, I learned a little more about what it meant to live with dignity, to carry yourself with grace, even when life hasn't been kind. She'd never say it outright, but I knew she was proud of me. And Haley. She had apologized, yes, but something in me still wasn't sure if I believed it. She hadn't done enough. I wasn't asking for perfection, but I needed her to understand what she had taken from me, from all of us. It wasn't just the betrayal of trust. It was the manipulation, the way she played everyone, including herself. But I had made my peace with the fact that I couldn't change her. That wasn't on me. I could only control how I moved forward. I started painting again more than I had in months. I was no longer painting out of the need to escape. I was painting because it felt right, because it gave me a way to express what I had kept inside for so long. I didn't need anyone else to validate it. It was mine. The turning point, though, came when I found myself in the middle of a small art show at school with my paintings hanging for everyone to see. It was a strange feeling standing there looking at my work, my own expression of everything I'd been through. The kids who had once whispered about me now came over to take a closer look, some of them offering quiet compliments. It wasn't validation I was after, but in that moment, it felt like something had clicked into place. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the victim or the scapegoat. I was Madison. And that was enough. One afternoon, as I was walking home from school, I ran into my father. He was standing by the front door looking as if he was waiting for me. It was a simple moment, but it carried so much weight. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something different in his eyes. Regret, yes, but also a sense of humility that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "For everything. For not believing you. For not being there when you needed me most." I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't the apology that mattered. It was the acknowledgement that I wasn't just some mistake to be swept under the rug. I had been a person to him, a daughter who deserved respect. It was a small step, but it was enough. I know I said softly, my heart a little lighter, "It's going to take time, but it's a start." And with that, we both stood there for a moment, neither of us rushing to say anything else. Sometimes silence spoke louder than words. That evening after dinner, Grandma Maggie asked me how I was doing, and I told her the truth. "I'm okay," I said, though I wasn't sure I fully believed it myself. "I'm learning to be okay with what happened. I think I can move forward now." She smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. "That's all anyone can do, Madison. Move forward. And be kind to yourself along the way." It felt like the end of a long journey, one that I had never expected to take. But I had learned something along the way, something I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the mistakes of others, or even the things that had been done to me. It was about choosing to live with integrity no matter what happened around me. It was about taking back my voice and my life one step at a time. The story didn't end with a neat bow tied around it. There would always be more to face, more to work through. But I had learned to carry my truth with me, and I knew that was enough. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you've been pushed down, silenced, or forgotten, remember, you are never alone. There is always a way to rise. It might take time, it might take strength, but you have the power to take that first step. I did. And if I can, so can you. Thank you for listening to my story. Please share your thoughts, or if you found strength in your own journey, I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories of resilience and truth.